Okay, tonight, we're stepping into a story that once divided a nation. A story where truth and illusion became inseparable. Every town hides its shadows. Some are buried beneath quiet streets, others in behind the walls of a perfect home. But in Cleveland, 1954, one murder would turn a respected doctor into America's most infamous suspect, and an unsolved mystery into a decades-long search for truth. Welcome to Criminal Mindcast, the podcast where we tell true crime stories not just with facts, but with silence, with the haunting weight of what was never said. Here we don't chase headlines. We explore the human mind, its fractures, its fears, and the darkness it tries to hide. Tonight's episode follows Dr. Sam Sheppard, a devoted physician, husband and father whose world collapsed in a single night. When his wife was found murdered in their own home, his life became a battlefield of suspicion, grief, and distorted justice. What followed wasn't merely a crime story. It was a collision between truth, perception, and power, and behind every headline lies a question that refuses to die. In Bay Village, a calm Cleveland suburb, people left their doors unlocked and trusted their neighbors. It was a town framed by the soft rhythm of waves from Lake Erie and the quiet routines of American mid-century life. Children played on the sidewalks, church bells marked the passing hours, and everyone seemed to know everyone else. But beneath that calm, something was about to break. At the edge of this peaceful community stood a house that seemed to embody the dream, a wide-windowed home looking out over the lake, owned by Dr. Sam Sheppard and his wife, Marilyn. To the outside world, they were a picture of success, young, attractive, and living a life that many admired. Marilyn, just 31, carried herself with a gentle confidence. She was known for her warmth, her kindness, her ability to make others feel safe. In a town that valued appearances, she had what seemed to be a perfect life, a loving husband, a beautiful son, a home filled with light. She adored her son, Sam Reese, and spent long hours with him on the beach, collecting stones, watching the gulls. She spoke often about wanting another child, about expanding their family and filling their home with more laughter. Her friends remembered her laughter, soft but sincere, as though she was constantly grateful for what she had. Yet behind that laughter, there was sometimes a pause, a momentary stillness that no one noticed at the time. Dr. Sam Sheppard, her husband, was one of the most respected physicians at Bayview Hospital, a man whose name carried weight far beyond the small town. He was tall, handsome, athletic, and unfailingly confident. His patients trusted him, his colleagues admired him, and his community saw in him the embodiment of discipline and success. He played football in college, was known for his quick smile and his steady hands, but those who knew him more intimately sensed something else, a restlessness that lingered in the silence between his achievements. Behind the charm was exhaustion, both physical and emotional. The long hours at the hospital, the pressure of responsibility, and the unspoken expectation to maintain a flawless image began to erode the calm exterior. His marriage, once the envy of neighbors, began to show the faintest signs of strain. The couple's friends whispered that Sam had become distant, preoccupied, even cold. There were quiet rumors, an attractive assistant at the hospital, a friendship that had grown too close. Nothing was ever confirmed, but in a small town, whispers have a way of finding their echo. He was a man trying to heal everyone but himself. That perhaps was his quiet tragedy. He moved through his days with precision, diagnosing, operating, comforting others, but somewhere beneath the surface his own life was slipping out of balance. The fatigue hardened into detachment. The detachment turned into isolation. What looked like confidence began to resemble indifference. Bay Village itself was the kind of place that lulled its residents into a false sense of safety. Neatly trimmed lawns, gentle laughter over white picket fences, barbecues by the lake. It was the American dream, packaged and polished. But the calm of such places often hides something deeper, secrets unspoken, emotions suppressed, desires denied. The Sheppards were not immune to this quiet pressure. Their world, too, had its fractures, invisible to those who only saw the surface. Neighbors noticed that Marilyn spent more time alone lately. Sometimes she sat by the lake after sunset, staring into the water, her expression unreadable. She was a woman of grace, but also of silence. And silence, in a house filled with expectation, can grow heavier than words. The Sheppard home stood as both sanctuary and stage. Inside there were family photos, soft lamps, and laughter at the dinner table. Yet there were also long pauses, nights spent apart, conversations that ended with the kind of silence that bruises more than shouting ever could. It's easy to imagine that nothing serious was wrong. After all, every couple argues, every marriage endures fatigue. But sometimes what feels ordinary is only the surface of something deeper, something quietly unraveling. To the outside world, they were untouchable, the model family of Bay Village. To those within the walls, life was growing more fragile by the day. Dr. Sheppard buried himself in work, driven by a sense of duty and a need to escape the slow disintegration of his marriage. Marilyn, in her loneliness, clung to the fragments of normalcy. Visits with friends, afternoons with her son, letters she never finished writing. In communities like Bay Village, reputation is a form of currency. Appearances are maintained with the same devotion as faith. Everyone smiles, but everyone watches. And when the first crack appears in a perfect life, the gaze of others becomes unbearable. For the Sheppards, that gaze would soon become relentless. Looking back, there were signs, small, almost invisible. A sharp word at a dinner party, a moment of tension quickly disguised as humor, a husband who arrived home late, and a wife who waited in silence. These were not signs of violence, but of distance, the slow erosion of intimacy that no one sees until it is too late. If you walked down that quiet street in 1954, you would have seen a home full of light, laughter, and promise. You would have seen a doctor admired by all and a wife loved by many. You would have thought, as most did, that nothing bad could ever happen there. But perfection is often the most fragile illusion of all. Behind every curtain drawn against the night, there are stories untold, fears unspoken, tears unseen. Sometimes tragedy doesn't begin with rage or hatred, but with exhaustion, loneliness, and silence that grows too heavy to bear. The Sheppard story is, at its heart, about silence, the quiet distance between appearance and truth, love and fear. It's the silence inside every perfect home, heavy with expectation, until one still July night. That silence finally broke. The night of July 4th, 1954, began like any other summer evening in Bay Village. Soft waves tapping against the lakeshore, fireworks echoing faintly across the water, and the faint hum of cicadas filling the warm air. Inside the Sheppard home, everything seemed peaceful. Marilyn stayed upstairs tidying her son's room, while Sam sat downstairs in the den, watching Strange Holiday on television. He'd worked long hours that week and looked forward to a quiet night at home. Later, neighbors recalled that Marilyn sounded happy earlier that evening. She and Sam had spent the night with friends, laughing, sharing drinks, and discussing their plans for the 4th of July. It was an ordinary suburban night, the kind where nothing extraordinary is ever supposed to happen. But sometime after midnight, as Sam drifted in and out of sleep on the couch, something shifted. A dog began barking outside, sharp, insistent. Then, a strange sound from upstairs. The phone rang once, maybe twice, before the house fell silent again. Sam stirred, half awake, thinking it was nothing. In later testimony, he said he heard his wife call his name faintly, as if from a dream. And then, the scream. It was a sound that cut through the quiet of the neighborhood, desperate and short. One neighbor, startled from sleep, thought it was a child. Another said it came from the direction of the Sheppard home, but by the time anyone looked, the night had already swallowed the sound. Sam said he ran upstairs and saw a shadow, a man with bushy hair standing over Marilyn. He rushed forward, grappling in the dark, the intruder's form half lit by moonlight through the curtains. Then, a blow to the back of his neck. Everything went black. When he came to, the room was still. His wife lay motionless. The house was silent except for the faint lapping of waves outside. He staggered to his feet, dizzy and disoriented, calling her name. No response. What happened next remains one of the most disputed moments in American criminal history. At 5:40 a.m., the police received a frantic call from Dr. Sam Sheppard. His voice was trembling. "My God," he said, "they've killed Marilyn." Within minutes, Bay Village police arrived at the scene and walked into chaos. The master bedroom was in disarray. Blood spattered across the walls, sheets twisted and torn, furniture overturned, drawers pulled open. A surgical watch and a lamp lay broken on the floor. But strangely, the house itself showed no sign of forced entry. The officers moved carefully, trying to make sense of what they saw. Marilyn's body lay in bed, the violence shocking in such a quiet home. Her son, asleep in another room, was untouched. Sam was downstairs, shirtless, dazed, his face pale and his hands trembling. He had a cut on his head, bruises on his neck, and his speech was slow, unfocused. He told police he'd been attacked, knocked unconscious twice. Once upstairs, once again after chasing the intruder down to the beach. But when they searched the property, there was no clear evidence of anyone else. No footprints, no foreign fingerprints, nothing missing of real value. The air inside that house felt heavy, as if the silence itself held its breath. Neighbors gathered outside, whispering, trying to make sense of it all. By sunrise, the story had already spread. The Sheppards, Bay Village's golden couple, shattered by violence. Yet even in those first hours, something about Sam's demeanor unsettled investigators. He seemed too calm, too distant. He spoke in fragments, occasionally clutching his neck or rubbing his eyes, as though trying to remember something that kept slipping away. When asked what the intruder looked like, he repeated, "A bushy-haired man, I couldn't see his face." Some officers sympathized, a husband in shock, concussed, barely processing what had happened. Others were less convinced. His injuries, though visible, seemed minor compared to the brutality upstairs, and his story, an intruder who vanished without a trace, felt too clean. Reporters arrived before noon. Word had spread fast, and soon the Sheppard home became the center of attention. Cameras, notepads, speculation, all circling around one man. Investigators combed through the scene again and again. The dog hadn't barked until late. Strange if a stranger had broken in earlier. The phone lines worked fine. The neighbors hadn't seen anyone flee. The only car near the property that night belonged to the Sheppards. And still, Sam insisted, there had been someone else. He told police he had chased the attacker down to the lakeshore, struggled again, then blacked out. They found his footprints in the sand, and only his. The contradictions piled up. Missing evidence. Sam's watch and keys were gone, later found in the bushes near the house. No blood on the doorknobs, no clear signs of entry. Was it a home invasion, one detective muttered, or something closer to home? By evening, the media had already chosen its narrative. The handsome doctor, the beautiful wife, the brutal murder. A story made for headlines. But in the quiet spaces between flashbulbs and rumors, a different picture began to emerge. Of a man caught between grief and suspicion, truth and illusion. He wept when he saw his wife's body, but his tears came too late for some, too perfectly timed for others. He spoke of love, but his distance told another story. Every word he said was now evidence, every gesture, a clue. That night, the police escorted him away from the house. He looked back once and toward the home he'd built, now a crime scene, toward the life that had collapsed in a single night. The lake glimmered faintly behind him, indifferent, eternal. And as the lights of the patrol car disappeared into the distance, the whispers began. What really happened that night in Bay Village? Was Sam Sheppard a victim, or the author of his own tragedy? The case that began as a tragedy soon became a spectacle, and Sam Sheppard, its unwilling centerpiece. The investigation that followed was supposed to seek truth. Instead, it became a slow-motion collapse of reason. Within days, police attention narrowed to one man, Dr. Sam Sheppard. From the moment they arrived that July morning, suspicion had coiled around him like fog. There was no forced entry, no sign of robbery, no stranger caught on the street. What remained was proximity, the old rule that the closest person must be the most guilty. And in a house of two, proximity was a sentence. Detectives interrogated Sam repeatedly, pressing him to recount his story, again, until words blurred. He repeated what he remembered, the shadow, the struggle, the darkness. Yet each time officers circled back to his tone, his composure. He didn't weep enough. He didn't tremble enough. To them, it wasn't grief they saw in his silence, but calculation. His medical precision, once admired, now appeared as coldness. Within 48 hours, reporters arrived like vultures. News vans lined the streets of Bay Village. Headlines screamed from every paper: Doctor kills wife, murder in the perfect suburb, the Sheppard mystery. Details leaked daily, often twisted, sometimes entirely invented. The press didn't wait for evidence, it built its own. What began as tragedy turned to theatre. Sam's friends and colleagues found themselves quoted in half-truths. A casual remark about marital tension became proof of a secret affair. A neighbor's memory of raised voices, once dismissed, became a headline. Evidence ignored, timelines twisted, assumptions turned into facts. The investigation became a performance, and Sam, unwillingly, its lead actor. Police searched for motive, and the newspapers supplied one. Stories of infidelity spread quickly, naming a nurse at the hospital, hinting at jealousy, exhaustion, betrayal. The doctor's reputation unraveled in print before he ever entered a courtroom. To the public, he wasn't a physician anymore. He was the archetype of the husband who snapped. In truth, the case against Sam was built on shadows, circumstantial details stitched together by pressure and perception. The coroner's report was inconclusive. Forensic analysis, primitive by today's standards, proved little, yet investigators pushed forward, guided less by evidence than by expectation. By late July, the entire nation was watching. Newspapers sold millions of copies. Radio hosts dissected the murder every morning. Bay Village, once a quiet lakeside suburb, had become a stage for moral outrage. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere was electric, suffocating. Reporters filled every seat. Spectators lined the walls. Outside, vendors sold coffee and newspapers to the growing crowd. Each new witness became a headline. Each word Sam spoke was broadcast and dissected. When he maintained his composure, calm, reserved, almost distant, the public saw arrogance, not discipline. His stoicism, once a mark of professionalism, became proof of guilt. The phrase trial by media wasn't yet common, but this case defined it. Newspapers published editorials demanding conviction. The local prosecutor ran for re-election on the strength of public anger. Jurors, supposedly impartial, read headlines before entering court each day. There was no boundary between journalism and judgment. 3 theories emerged, each louder than the last. The first was simple and seductive: a domestic dispute gone wrong. The image of a tired, jealous husband snapping in rage fit the narrative perfectly. It required no mystery, no stranger in the dark. It turned tragedy into morality play, a lesson about the dangers of pride and infidelity. The second theory was stranger, that Sam staged a burglary to cover up his crime. The missing watch, the broken furniture, the disordered room, all could be fabricated. The theory had gaps, but it appealed to logic. Doctors, after all, understood anatomy, control, deception. Who better to disguise violence than a man trained to heal? And then there was the third theory, the one Sam himself insisted on until his death, that the fake, bushy-haired man was real. Witnesses in nearby towns claimed to have seen a drifter matching the description. Years later, DNA evidence would give this idea new life. But in 1954, it sounded like desperation, a ghost story from a guilty man. The prosecution built its case on psychology as much as on fact. They painted Sam as arrogant, adulterous, emotionally detached, a man who could kill in silence and call it reason. They held up his calmness as proof that no innocent man could remain so controlled. Yet behind that composure was shock, trauma, perhaps denial. The mind, under accusation, often retreats into silence. But silence has never been good theatre. Each day, Marilyn's memory was reshaped to fit the narrative. She became the innocent wife, the moral center. Sam, the fallen husband, the symbol of hidden corruption. And the public, hungry for resolution, devoured the story like ritual. In the court of public opinion, the verdict came early. Before the jury even deliberated, before the defense could present its case, the nation had already decided he was guilty. The pressure fractured the Sheppard family. Sam's father, unable to bear the disgrace, took his own life. His mother followed soon after. What began as grief became shame. What began as justice became destruction. Everywhere, the line between truth and spectacle vanished. Reporters followed Sam's son, hounded his relatives, turned private pain into headlines. The trial blurred into melodrama. The courtroom ceased to be a place of reason. It became entertainment. Justice was no longer blind, one observer wrote. It was televised. On December 21, 1954, the verdict arrived. Guilty of second-degree murder, life in prison. Sam didn't move. He stood still, hands clasped, eyes empty, not proud, not defiant, simply hollow. Some called it arrogance. Others saw a man too broken to react. Outside, cameras flared and headlines roared. America had its villain, its closure, its clean ending. The story was complete, or so it seemed. But stories built on noise rarely endure. Years later, when the lights dimmed, new whispers emerged. Forensic evidence resurfaced, testimonies cracked, and a question long buried clawed its way back to light. What if everyone had been wrong? The human mind is a fragile instrument under pressure, precise when calm, distorted when cornered. When a person becomes the object of suspicion, perception warps. Fear breeds confusion. Shame turns memory into fog, and every gesture is read through the lens of guilt. For Dr. Sam Sheppard, this psychological crucible became his daily reality. In the eyes of the public, his silence was not restraint but concealment, his composure not discipline but calculation. Yet those who have lived through trauma know silence is often the last defense of a collapsing mind. When the world accuses you, a psychologist once said, silence becomes both shield and sentence. Sam's stoicism, once a mark of professionalism, became a prison of its own. His training as a surgeon had taught him to suppress emotion, to act under pressure with unflinching steadiness. But in a courtroom, that discipline betrayed him. Where the world demanded tears, he offered quiet. Where they wanted confession, he gave reason. It was not what people wanted to see from an innocent man. Years turned into decades. Appeals were filed and denied. The world moved on. Yet the case remained lodged in America's collective memory, a cautionary tale about how easily truth could drown in noise. Then, in the 1960s, a slow reversal began. Investigative journalists, legal scholars, and forensic experts revisited the evidence. They found inconsistencies, police reports missing key details, photographs misinterpreted, testimony shaped by assumption rather than proof. In 1966, after 12 years in prison, Sam's conviction was overturned. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled that his trial had been tainted by prejudicial media coverage, a violation of due process. He was released, but freedom did not feel like redemption. When Sam walked out of prison, he was a ghost of the man he once was. His career as a surgeon was shattered. The medical board hesitated to reinstate his license, and the public still viewed him through the lens of guilt. The home in Bay Village was long sold. His son had grown up amid whispers and tabloid headlines. His name had become both a legend and a curse. Sam tried to rebuild. He returned briefly to medicine but found himself plagued by tremors, physical reminders of years spent behind bars. His hands, once steady enough to operate, now betrayed him. Eventually, he left the profession altogether. For a time, he turned to professional wrestling, a spectacle of strength that felt both tragic and defiant. It was not work for a doctor, but perhaps it was the only arena left where he could fight back, even symbolically, against a world that had misjudged him. But inside, the war never ended. He drank heavily, battled depression, and carried the invisible wounds of public humiliation. The trauma of wrongful conviction, psychologists say, creates a unique kind of scar, one where identity itself fractures. The victim becomes alien to his own reflection. Truth, once a moral compass, becomes irrelevant when no one believes it. Sam Sheppard died in 1970 at just 46 years old, officially of liver failure, unofficially of exhaustion, despair, and the slow corrosion of a soul that could never clear its name. Yet the story did not die with him. His son, Sam Reese Sheppard, devoted much of his life to seeking vindication for his father. In the 1990s, new forensic technology began to reopen old wounds. DNA testing, non-existent in 1954, was applied to the remaining evidence. What it revealed was unsettling. Blood at the crime scene did not match either Sam or Marilyn. A third profile appeared, someone unknown. Decades after the headlines faded, the possibility that Sam had been telling the truth gained weight. The discovery reignited debate. Was the real killer a burglar, a drifter, or someone closer to the family? Police records hinted at other suspects, including a man with a history of break-ins near the Sheppard home. Yet by then, too much time had passed, evidence was lost, memories faded, and witnesses gone. The case remained, officially unsolved, a scar on the American justice system. Philosophically, the Sheppard case exposes something deeper than legal failure. It confronts our instinct to simplify evil, to name a monster so we can feel safe again. Stoic philosophy teaches that truth exists beyond emotion, beyond the storm of judgment. The Stoics believed that the wise man stands firm in reason, even when surrounded by chaos. Sam tried to do that, but reason in the court of emotion is often mistaken for indifference. Perhaps the real prison was not the cell, but the weight of judgment. When society decides someone is guilty, evidence becomes decoration. When the crowd demands certainty, doubt becomes a weakness. The Sheppard case reminds us that justice is not only about facts, it is about perception, and perception can kill. In the end, what destroyed Dr. Sam Sheppard was not violence, but narrative. The story told about him became more powerful than the truth he lived. It was shaped by fear, amplified by media, and sealed by our collective need for closure. There is a psychological law, observed across countless cases. When faced with uncertainty, the human mind invents villains. It is easier to believe in a single guilty man than in the chaos of chance. Easier to close the book than to accept that some pages will never be written. Sam's life stands as a warning that truth without patience becomes tragedy. His son once said, "My father's story was never just about guilt or innocence. It was about how quickly we abandon compassion when fear takes the stand." Perhaps the deepest wound was never what happened to him, but what his story revealed about us. If monsters exist, they may not lurk in the dark, but within our hunger for judgment, our fear of doubt, our need for certainty. Maybe evil isn't a face, but a reflection. And as silence settled once more over Bay Village, one question still haunted the air. Who truly killed Marilyn Sheppard? In the end, the story of Dr. Sam Sheppard is not just about a murder. It is about how truth can vanish beneath the weight of pride, fear, and public judgment. His case endures as one of America's most haunting reminders that when justice sways to emotion, innocence can be shattered, and truth may fade quietly into the noise that once claimed to defend it. We seek certainty in a world built on doubt, yet so often what we call guilt is only grief disguised, sorrow mistaken for sin, and truth, once buried beneath fear and noise, never truly dies. It lingers in the silence, waiting to be heard by those still willing to listen. If this story made you pause or reflect, remember to like, share this video, and subscribe for more true crime stories that uncover not just what happened, but the deeper truths behind why it still matters. Some crimes leave no screams, only questions, and some silences echo louder than any confession. Thank you for listening to Criminal Mindcast.